I want to talk about the Kyle Rittenhouse case because you and I have talked about this a little bit, but it gets into self-defense, gun rights, and culture wars and partisanships and the criminal justice system. But just to go over the basic facts, so flashback to last summer where there was the BLM movement after George Floyd and other things, and in some cases there were violent riots that broke out, peaceful protests in many places. In some places there was looting, there was riots. One of the places where they had that rioting and looting was Kenosha, Wisconsin. And a 17-year-old guy named Kyle Rittenhouse crossed state lines, but he didn't, and this is actually important, he didn't bring a gun with him, but he came from nearby Illinois and he went to Kenosha, Wisconsin, to go to this one of these riots and basically volunteer as a medic slash a go in with weapons. He went and picked up a rifle to protect businesses that he thought the government was failing to protect. And what happened there is essentially he got into an altercation with 3 people over a series of events that's now been fleshed out in court. But 2 people were shot and killed, and 1 person was shot and injured. And he's faced murder charges. And basically, it's a self-defense case. The jury's actually debating it right now. I think that he will be acquitted. But beyond that, like the specifics of this verdict aren't what matter for purposes of our conversation and for listeners. It's really more the principles at play here. And I think the first one for me is about, this case has really shown me why the criminal defense and like civil procedures are so important. Because I want to just play a clip for you real quick of the judge going off on this prosecutor.
I was astonished when you began your examination by commenting on the defendant's post-arrest silence. That's basic law. It's been basic law in this country for 40 years, 50 years. I have no idea why you would do something like that. And it gives, well, I'll leave it at that. So I don't know what you're up to.
So as you just heard, this prosecutor literally tried to use Kyle Rittenhouse's, the fact that he had been silent after his arrest, against him in court. That's like textbook Constitution 101. You have the right to remain silent and it can't be used against you. I mean, is this just a particularly clownish prosecutor, or do people's rights actually just get blatantly disregarded like this all the time?
I think it's both. This prosecutor is doing a terrible job, especially knowing all eyes are on him. And this kind of rookie mistake, I really think was just a desperate plea. I think he knows he's losing this case. I think he knows that the witnesses have not ended up being very favorable to him at all. And what we saw him do, there were 2 kind of instances where he really messed up in the courtroom and actually could have caused a mistrial, which is why the judge reacted as strongly as he did. The first thing he did was he tried to insert a question that used some language Kyle had allegedly used after his arrest. That's a no-no, and the judge had already said that that was not evidence that could be admitted. So by asking that question, he tried to like basically get that in front of the jury, because even when you strike that and say, you know, that can't be taken into consideration, the jury's heard what the jury's heard. And I think he was just desperate to try to get something out there. He did that. And then he pushed on the fact that Kyle stayed silent, which of course we know is like one of the most basic constitutional rights somebody has. That, I mean, yeah, that he absolutely knew that he could not ask that. He could not bring that up. And we actually saw the judge, I think, do him a favor. He did at least have the jury leave before he dressed him down, but the judge really kind of lost it on him because a mistrial is a big deal. You know, you have to remember that we spend millions of dollars on cases like this. They are not cheap. They take tons of hours and resources from the government. So if you have a mistrial and that has to all start over, it's very costly and expensive. And so the judge was rightfully very upset and basically threatened him with that could end up being a mistrial kind of issue. So that's what was going on there. And I think at the end of the day, the one rare thing is that we don't often see judges actually stick up to prosecutors like that. We know that the vast majority of judges are former prosecutors themselves. And so we've got this really icky kind of system where you've got the judge and the prosecutor and the law enforcement, often even things like the crime labs work for the prosecutors and are all kind of stacked together against the defendant, which is exactly opposite of how our system was supposed to be structured, where it was supposed to prioritize the rights of the defendant over the overreaching, powerful government. It doesn't really do that. And so we see a ton of prosecutorial misconduct that really never gets addressed. It never gets reprimanded. I mean, you'll see this over and over. If you're a defense attorney who pulls this kind of thing, you will eventually be disbarred. You'll have your license taken away. I don't think I've ever heard of that happening to a prosecutor, even though it happens all the time. They're just as guilty, if not more so, of misconduct. And in fact, in the wrongful convictions we've discovered thus far, of which there have been thousands, we see that prosecutorial misconduct is responsible in 19% of those. And so it's not a small issue. They frequently get away with doing this kind of thing and put innocent people in jail, and nothing ever happens to them. They just get to keep on prosecuting cases.
But is this a learning moment or is it just going to get caught up in our partisan mindedness? Because you and I both like call out Republicans or Democrats. We care about principles, not party. And this has been one of the most maddening things for me, because all of a sudden my timeline is filled with conservatives railing about due process for criminal defendants. And I'm like, welcome to the gang. Like, come on. But then literally like Hakeem Jeffries, this Democrat congressman, tweeted like, lock up Kyle Rittenhouse and throw away the key before the trial was over. And he's supposed to be like a huge criminal justice reform progressive. And so it's been consumed in the culture war, and you have both sides becoming total hypocrites. I mean, does it madden you a little bit that both sides can like not actually get the principles at stake in this case of Kyle Rittenhouse about due process, about criminal procedure? They're just making it a party thing all over again.
Yeah, it's quite exhausting. It's something I've witnessed over the years working on criminal justice reform for some time. You know, I've often said to people on the right, when talking about issues like the death penalty and other criminal justice reform policy topics, like, you say you believe in limited government. This is not that. You say you care about individual liberty. Our justice system makes a mockery of it. How do you not care about these issues? How do you want to keep giving this justice system the power to kill people? And why do you not want more scrutiny? Why is it back the blue instead of scrutinize the blue? Like, why does the justice system and its actors get this passed, right? We as conservatives, libertarians know that government is fallible and corrupt. And even when it means to do well, it often causes more harm than it does good. The justice system is no departure from that. It's exactly the same. But unfortunately, we do typically see this sort of pendulum swing where if the defendant looks like you politically and matches your political beliefs, then you tend to back them. And if not, you back the government. And we just see this unearned trust in general. And I think some of that comes from the media, right? There's so much police propaganda out there. Like, I used to love shows like Law and Order SVU. Cannot watch them anymore.
I do love it though. I love Olivia. I love the show, but I don't think about it too deeply.
Yeah, I used to think Elliot Stabler was like super hot. Now I'm like, oh, loved him. But
okay, well, he was one of the most problematic people in the whole show.
Such an abusive cop, like so problematic, not hot at all. But when I was in high school, man, like I was into it. But we even see juries like buy into this, right? We call it the CSI effect, where they are more likely to believe police and prosecutors because they work for the government and they've been conditioned to see them as the good guy. So there's so much for us to break through to really get down to the conversation we need to have, which is that government is always problematic. And I see the same thing on the left, right? Where they say, oh, the justice system's so terrible, policing is so terrible, and then they want to give the government a ton of more power. It just doesn't check out on either side. In reality, the truth is that this is always going to be a problematic system because power is corrupting, and we have to limit its power, and we have to make it more transparent and hold it more accountable. Because what we're seeing in the Kyle Rittenhouse case is the tip of the iceberg, right? Like, the fact that he even got a trial is phenomenal because 95 to 99% of cases are pled out. Most people don't even get to go in front of a jury and plead their case anymore.
And that's how these bad prosecutors who are bad at their jobs get away with it.
Mm-hmm. They don't even have to have that much evidence, right? They just bully people into signing these coercive plea bargains. They scare them. They threaten them. Most people can't afford to hire attorneys to defend themselves, so they sign it away and they take their sentence. When people refuse to do that and actually press on and do go to trial, they're often more likely to be convicted because it's called the trial penalty. So what we see is then prosecutors get kind of mad because they won't take their deal and they throw harsher charges at them, which I think is partly what happened in the Rittenhouse case, right? We saw some like really ridiculous charges that were never going to stick and most people knew it, but they kind of just try to throw the book at them. And again, the jury is usually more inclined to listen to the prosecutors and police. So we actually see if you do push for your right to trial, there's like this penalty attached to it. And so it makes it really hard for anybody to actually get a fair shake in the justice system. And I think at the end of the day, for Kyle, were it not for the vast amount of media and attention on this case, I think his outcome probably would not be the same. Because it has had that kind of scrutiny, I think that we have seen a lot of mistakes by the prosecutor. I think the judge has been more on top top of it. And I agree with you. I think ultimately he likely will be acquitted because the evidence was never there against him. But that typically just doesn't matter that much in our case, or in our system. I've seen so many death penalty cases where the evidence is even less than what they have on Kyle, and they put these people on death row because they don't have good defenders. You know, typically public defenders have hundreds of cases at a time, so they cannot possibly adequately defend those people. And if people don't have any money to actually go out and hire an attorney, they end up getting convicted quite easily in the system, and there's really nothing done about it.
Yeah, and I don't know for sure who Kyle's lawyers are, but I know he does not have a public defender, right? He's gotten a successful big attorneys to come in, and he's got the resources to defend himself, and that's great. But everyone should have that, and that's not where we are. But I want to talk about another aspect of this case, which is self-defense. And I don't love what I see on really right-wing online chatter, where they're basically making Kyle out to be a hero or a god, because I don't think of it that way. I think it was profoundly irresponsible of him to grab a gun and run into a riot zone. Yes, the government failed to do, one of their most basic things we count on them to do, protect property. But I just ask people, if you had a 17-year-old son, would you want them to go put themselves in that situation? Of course not. And that I think was a profound mistake of judgment. But that doesn't matter when it comes to the legal question of, was he exercising self-defense? All that matters is what happened once he was there in those moments where people rushed at him, someone tried to grab his gun, and it really does, like he was defending himself. And more importantly than anything, the prosecution has to prove that he wasn't. Right? The burden is on them to prove his guilt. He is innocent until proven guilty. And the fact that this prosecutor doesn't seem to understand that is really troubling, because self-defense is a fundamental American right. Hannah, just listen to this. Listen to what this prosecutor had to say.
You can't claim self-defense against an unarmed man like this. You lose the right to self-defense when you're the one who brought the gun, when you're the one creating the danger, when you're the one provoking other people.
So you heard that. You lose the right to self-defense when you're the one who brought the gun. That's what the prosecutor said. Is he drunk?
Cheese and rice. I am terrified. As a woman who carries for my own safety and defense, that is not the standard. It can never be the standard. That is just ludicrous. Again, this is a prosecutor who's so desperate. He knows he's losing. He's making really stretched arguments. He's also said things like Kyle Rittenhouse should have just taken a beating. Right? That like he should have just like let him attack him. And then I also saw this clip of him online where the prosecutor was trying to diminish Rosenblum, one of the men who was killed, all of his actions that night. He's like, the guy showed up. He tipped a porta potty over. He set things on fire. He whipped a chain. He screamed the N-word. Like, that doesn't sound that threatening to me. And I'm like, I'm terrified. Like, this sounds totally unhinged. Like, what? It makes no sense at all. And I think this is one reason people have really rallied to this case, is they do see it as a Second Amendment issue. And I think largely the left has made it that, right? I think they thought they were going to get sort of some points on this. At the end of the day, though, it's a pretty cut and dry instance of self-defense. I think Kyle was a stupid kid. I don't think he should have been encouraged to be there. I think that's another failing of police that we saw during these riots, where they really didn't do much to keep the peace and were even like thanking kind of vigilante would-bes who were out there for being out there. Like, it was not a good structure. And if I was a mother, I would never have let my child run out there with a gun. Like, come on. But at the end of the day, he did not act violently until he was actually pursued and chased. And I remember one of the people he shot who survived actually on the stand admitted he pointed a gun at Kyle first. So it's so cut and dry. It's so obvious that he acted in self-defense. And I think that when we're looking at the guilt or innocence of defendants, we have to remember, like, whether we have to take our emotions out of it, right? People can do stupid things. There's very rarely such thing as a perfect defendant or a perfect victim, which Kyle would have been a victim had he not defended himself that night. That doesn't mean that you stand by all of their actions, but that does mean you say there's no reason or right for the government to take away their liberties.
Yeah, and that's the key point, that it's like become this stupid culture war over whether he was, like, people on the left have said he's a white supremacist, even though the people he shot are white. And like, it's either like he's this evil villain or he's like this godlike hero. And I'm like, no, he was a scared, stupid teenager put in a terrible situation who defended himself and should not be in jail, but he should probably be in therapy after such a traumatic experience for all parties involved.